My name is Lieutenant Chanel DeBella. I am the commanding officer at the Salvation Army of Decatur and Macon County. I am a member of the Continuum of Care. Based on your personal experience in the past few years, would you guess that homelessness in the Decatur area is increasing or decreasing? The answer might surprise you. Since 2014, homelessness in Macon County has decreased from 255 to 83 persons. That's a 67% decline, and that's an untold story. A success that's been happening quietly, without fanfare, in the streets of our community. In the next few minutes, we'll do three things. First, we will share with you the nature of homelessness. We'll tell you who does not have a place to live. Next, we will go behind the scenes of this work and look at how this successful effort has unfolded, who the key players are, and what strategies they use. And finally, we will look ahead and share what needs to be done to reach the point where there is a home for every one of our fellow community members. So let's get started. Who is homeless in Decatur and Macon County? We need to take a moment for a definition. For today's presentation, when we use the word homeless, we're talking about people who are on the streets or sleeping in shelters or park benches or abandoned buildings or fleeing domestic violence. The numbers in this presentation do not include people who are couch surfing or doubled up. That is, people who are staying temporarily with relatives or friends because they don't have a place of their own. Most of us would consider them to be homeless. And when the schools count students who are homeless, they include this group. But the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, does not count them, and we report our numbers to HUD. The numbers on the following slides are from the annual point in time count, which we conduct towards the end of January every year. It's a complete count of everyone who is experiencing homelessness in Decatur and throughout the county in one 24-hour period. So with that explanation taken care of, let's take a look. You can see from this slide that the vast majority of persons experiencing homelessness are adults, and almost all of them are single. In fact, that's much higher than the national average. Nationally, about 7 in 10 persons experiencing homelessness are single adults. But here it's about almost 100%. They range in age from 0 to over 60 years old, with a median age in the late 30s. The majority of persons in homelessness are white, about 7 in 10. This pattern has changed in the last couple of years. In 2018, 50% were African American. We can see that while overall homelessness has declined, it has declined more rapidly for Black persons than for whites. Most of the persons who are homeless have a roof over their heads at night, thanks to our great network of emergency shelters and transitional housing projects. In January of this year, 31 persons were unsheltered, which means they were not sleeping in a shelter or in transitional housing. That's 31 too many, and it's 37% of all persons in homelessness. This percentage has grown. It was 17% in 2020, but the actual number of persons who do not have a roof over their heads has been cut in half in the last 8 years. And that leads to our next topic, what we do to decrease homelessness. How did it happen, really? Who does the work of addressing homelessness, getting people services, offering them housing, getting them engaged with the system. And what is that system anyway? The entire effort of addressing homelessness in Decatur and Macon County is coordinated and guided by one entity, which we call the Decatur-Macon County Continuum of Care. Now, I know that's a strange name. It comes from HUD, which has divided the entire country into local planning regions for homelessness. And HUD calls these areas by the name Continuum of Care. There are more than 400 continuums of care. Some of them function better than others, and ours is pretty darn good because people in our town know how to collaborate. The purpose of the continuum is simple and daunting: to reduce homelessness in Macon County, Illinois. We're actually an organization of organizations. The COC is a voluntary, unincorporated network of stakeholders. It's been around since 1994, and its role is to oversee planning and coordination of all organizations that provide services and housing for people who are homeless. The COC has a governing board that is made up of the chief executives of these 16 organizations or their appointees. The COC's board also includes at least one person who is now or has in the past been homeless. This is so important because no one can tell you what it's like better than someone who has lived it. The board meets every month. Along with the board, we have a large and diverse advisory council that meets every 2 months. It is made up of frontline workers, civic groups, and individual citizens who want to help. The advisory council is one of the primary ways we get input from the larger community. Dove serves as the lead agency and convener for the COC. So that's the structure, but the important parts are at the ground level. Most persons enter the local homelessness system either through a shelter or through the Homeward Bound Center. Let's take that apart. Homeward Bound is a program of Dove located on East Clay Street, on the edge of our downtown. It serves as the port of entry for persons who are homeless. Once a person comes to Homeward Bound, they are met by a friendly face and taken to a private room where they can tell their story. From there, a case manager will work with them to resolve their housing situation. If it can be resolved quickly, and many times it can't, the workers will assess their situation and place them on a priority list for housing, with those who have the most urgent need going to the top of the list. Using an assessment tool, Homeward Bound will help them decide which types of housing are most likely to suit their needs and offer the best chance for a long-term, permanent, safe, and affordable place to live. Of course, sometimes people need a roof over their heads right now, and they go to one of our community shelters. When that happens, the shelter admits them right away, if they possibly can, and they usually put the person in touch with Homeward Bound as soon as practical. We call this process coordinated entry. What about the people on the streets? What about the ones you see sleeping in Central Park or asking you for money at a stoplight? The COC cares about them too, even if they are not ready to engage with us. A few years ago, we formed a team to reach out to the hardest to reach people in our community. CHAT stands for the Continuum Homeless Action Team. It is made up of street-level outreach workers from 8 organizations: Decatur Cares Rescue Mission, Decatur-Macon County Opportunities, Dove Homeward Bound, God's Shelter of Love, Heritage Behavioral Health Center, Oasis Day Center, and the Salvation Army and its supportive services for veteran families program. The chat team reaches out to the folks who have been homeless for the long term. They get to know them personally. They contact them weekly and they keep track of them. The goal is to reduce the danger to them and reduce the harm they might do to others, and to gain their confidence so they will engage with our system. Thanks to chat, in the past 3 years, we have moved more than 24 of the hardest to serve population off the streets and into housing of their own. A word about panhandling. If you are approached by a panhandler, you must make a choice whether or not to help them. And if you're concerned, please call this number. We'll send someone out to check. We do know that not everyone who claims to be homeless is actually homeless. We have a few people who say they are homeless to gain your sympathy and a donation. Others in our community like to make homelessness seem more prevalent than it is really. So from time to time, we hear rumors or we see social media posts about large encampments of homeless people. Thankfully, only a few of these stories turn out to be true. If someone tells you there is a gathering of homeless people somewhere in our area, please call this same phone number and give us the information. We'll have someone go out there and check. What housing is available for persons who don't have a home? We divide this housing into 3 basic categories: emergency shelters, transitional housing, and permanent housing. Emergency shelters, as the title implies, are not long-term housing. They are for emergencies. Their main function is to get people off the streets and out of danger for a short period of time, and to work with them to obtain permanent housing. They are the first station on the trip, not the destination. Our community has 7 emergency shelters with over 100 beds. Some of the names are familiar to you: the Salvation Army Men's Shelter, God's Shelter of Love, Water Street Mission, and Grace House. Webster Cantrell Youth Advocacy has a shelter for youth, and Dove has one for persons fleeing domestic violence. In addition, some organizations provide short-term motel vouchers as a form of emergency shelter. We call the second type of housing transitional. Transitional housing provides a safe place to live for up to 24 months while persons resolve the issues that keep them from getting homes of their own. People who are in transitional housing are offered intensive professional services, including domestic violence advocacy, mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, and financial counseling. In Decatur, we have more than 30 apartments and houses that we use as transitional housing, and they are equally divided among units for single adults and units for families. Most of them are reserved for persons who have been victimized by domestic violence. Of course, the only true solution to homelessness is homes, permanent housing that is safe, decent, and affordable. And even though the cost of housing in Decatur is pretty low compared to the rest of the country, we still do not have enough decent, affordable housing. Some COC partners manage a special form of housing that is called permanent supportive housing. This form of housing is for people who have severe life-limiting disabilities and who need long-term intensive services along with their housing. We have some 70 units of permanent supportive housing, mostly for single adults. We have another specialized type of permanent housing for people who need only a few months of help to get back on their feet. It's called rapid rehousing, and it can give temporary rental subsidies and voluntary support services. Finally, I want to share with you what's ahead and what we need to work on in the next few years to further reduce homelessness in Decatur and Macon County. The Strategic Planning Committee of the Continuum of Care recently took a detailed look at our current status and the recent trends and patterns. The results was 3 strategies. First, we need to improve our capacity to gather and analyze data. Good decisions are driven by accurate numbers. We need to get a better handle on the numbers. Most of the COC's provider agencies use a common database for client records. Dove recently created a staff position that is 100% dedicated to overseeing the database and extracting critical information. Not particularly sexy, perhaps, but it's crucially important. Second, we need to reduce the length of time that people stay in our emergency shelters. We want to work with each resident to develop a permanent housing plan. This will have 3 benefits. It will ensure that people do not think of a bed in a shelter as their permanent home. Second, it will get people out of homelessness fast. And third, it will free up bed space for those who need it. That's housing first at work. Our belief that housing comes first. The third and final strategy is to increase the supply of housing for single adults. That is our greatest need, and it holds the key to driving down the number of homeless persons down to nearly 0. To maximize our use of existing housing stock, we are developing positive relationships with landlords, and we are pursuing additional funds to assist with rent and utility payments. To create new units, we will need to think creatively and forge new partnerships. We will need to ask questions like these. Should we ask the city and county to change local codes and encourage more efficient use of space? Are tiny houses part of the solution? What about old-fashioned boarding houses? Can we find ways to support shared living arrangements where several adults can share a multi-bedroom house? How do we address the need for people to be in community and foster positive social interactions? As we ask these questions and find answers, we will build on our success and we will make homelessness history. There are 4 good ways that you can help us do exactly that. Make homelessness history in Decatur. The first way is to let us know when you see someone you think might be homeless. As I mentioned earlier, you can call this 24-hour number, 217-706-6614, and we'll check it out. You can call this same number if someone tells you there's a homeless camp in a specific location. The second thing you can do is help us tell the story. When you hear misconceptions about homelessness or when you see false rumors on social media, you can share accurate information. This will go a long way to helping the community get the true story. Third, you can volunteer. One good, safe place to start is at Good Samaritan Inn. The inn is in desperate need of reliable volunteers to prepare and serve midday meals to hundreds of persons facing hunger. Call Denise Jones at 217-429-1455 and tell her you want to volunteer. She'll take it from there. Finally, you can help someone who is moving into permanent housing with donations of household goods. We're talking about towels, bed sheets, plates and bowls, pots and pans, silverware, kitchen utensils, cleaning supplies, and paper goods. You get the idea. Everything you needed when you moved on your own for the first time in your life. You can deliver these items to the Northeast Community Fund on North Martin Luther King Jr. Drive on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays between 9 and 2 p.m. That's the true story. It's not untold because now you know it. Thank you.